Just not
Okay.
loosely, nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll focus on the one that you used to be a part of then and just kind of the learning from that, if that sounds okay
Yeah.
to you. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Great. All right. Well, I'm just going to kind of be hopping to my screens. If you see me kind of going back and forth, that's what I'm doing. And
Okay.
yeah. So I'm going to just ask the name of the intentional community that you used to be a part of.
Michael Fields
Michael
in,
Fields. Okay.
yeah, in
Okay.
East Troy,
Okay.
Wisconsin.
Great. Perfect. And how would you describe that intentional community?
Well, the original founder, Christopher Mann, had
Hmm.
done a similar Michael Fields community back in the 60s and 70s in
Hmm.
England. And it was very well designed. And then when he moved to the United States, he started, he bought 5 farms in East Troy, Wisconsin, and
Hmm.
always wanted at some point to design and institute another Michael Fields
Okay.
here.
Hmm.
So that came quite a bit later. First, he built the Michael Fields Biodynamic Institute to train farmers from around the world.
Hmm.
And then he got all the 5 farms up and running as working, but also teaching farms. And then eventually the community started to come into fruition in the late 80s,
Okay.
late
Okay.
80s. And I had worked with Christopher on farming projects and biodynamic and eco-village presentations to the community and that
Hmm.
type of thing.
Hmm.
So when Christopher wanted to start designing the community, I helped him assemble a team.
Hmm.
And Lou Host Jablonski was the premier architect for Madison.
Hmm.
And we brought Lou in as the architect designer. And then Christopher brought in a local developer, architect, more landscape designer. And
Hmm.
that was Peter, I can't remember his last name, I can't remember, SCH something. Anyway,
Hmm.
I never liked Peter. Peter, and I butted heads from day one because Peter, his whole focus was not on the environment, it was
Mm.
on making it profitable.
Mm. Hmm.
And Christopher and I were always on the bent of ecological, economical.
Hmm.
And Lou um, was more with Christopher and I. His was total sustainable design and kind of flexible so that we could have a multitude of different uses and a multitude of different people living there. Single people, married people, families, older generations,
Hmm.
all come together like a true intentional community. Well, Peter, he never saw it as that. He saw it as a kind of a extension of the rich suburbs of Chicago that people would come and pay big dollars to live in a beautiful environment. And if they're willing to pay, let's make it very expensive, high end, very high end.
Mm. I see.
So as the project went on, um, because Christopher and I designed it, that all the housing would face the creek and the wildlife and the marshlands, um, and have it be a walkable community with no inner roads and have the parking on the edges and have it pretty much undisturbed. Well, as time went on, I live probably 200 miles north of Christopher, and Lou lives in Madison. So we were distance. Well, Peter, I can't think of his name. Anyway, Peter lived in the community where Christopher lived. So they had constant contact with each other. And all of a sudden, the plans started showing up with um, driving and roadways and garages attached to the houses, and it was more and more exclusive and less what our original vision was.
Mm.
Christopher was also getting quite old, and he pretty much turned the project over to Peter. And Peter and I just we it got so far away from the original design and intent, and it really lost the original um, legacy of the Michael Fields project in England as well.
Mm.
So I stayed with it on the fringe then, and they started building. And I think out of the maybe 120 units, maybe only six got built because they were priced
Oh,
so
wow.
high. And then I moved away in 2000. I moved up here um, to a farm in New London, and I've been designing and reconstructing our farm from a working farm to a teaching farm to a glamp ground. And now we're in design phases and talks with thinking of moving it into more of a intentional community village.
Mm.
So my heart is back in it.
Hmm.
Um, the regulations here in Wapaka County, where I live, are very restrictive.
Yeah. Actually, I'm just going to keep us on the focus of the past one, if you don't mind. I would
Yeah,
love to hear about your current
no,
one. It
no.
sounds so exciting, but just to
But
keep
what
us on
happened
track.
was East Troy also, Walworth County, because um, it was kind of a experimental for the county. They saw it as this experimental because there was a grocery store and there was a farm market, and it met um, more of a intentional community. And they really didn't understand it, nor did they want it because it was so far out of all the other projects that had been developing in their community. So eventually the store did shut down, and the five farms, one of them was run by Ruth Zinnecker. She aged out and passed away. And so some of the farms were no longer under the control of Christopher. And
Hmm.
then Martina passed away, and Christopher has since passed away. He did make a movie, though. There was a documentary film on, um, not per se just on the Michael Fields project, but on sustainable development, sustainable farming, sustainable design. And he featured many different farms that he either had direct influence on or they were influenced by him indirectly.
Do you know the
So
name
it
of it?
was what?
Do you know the name of his documentary?
No, I went to the screening of it when it first came out. But if you contact Michael Fields Institute,
Hmm.
they can tell you the name of the film.
Okay, perfect.
And so that was a really interesting kind of, and Michael transition now. Michael Fields Institute is run by a board now, and it always
Hmm.
had been, but Christopher
Hmm.
and Martina were the funders and the top kind of mentors of it.
Hmm.
I don't, like I said, as I moved away, I lost contact because I had been doing projects with them
Hmm.
as long as Christopher and Martina were involved. But then as they aged out, I faded out of the picture as well.
Sure.
But we held a conference back in the fall of I think it was 1998, and that was specifically on eco villages.
Hmm.
And we were very much in tune with the European, and Christopher and Martina both had lived in Europe. So their background was um, on the historic and still existing intentional communities throughout
Hmm.
England and the kind of England, Great Britain area.
Hmm. Hmm. Sure. Sure.
So they
Yeah.
do work. They've been around a very, very long time. And when we did the conference, we looked at the the new one that was started down in Colombia, Gaviatis, and we brought in um, the journalist who wrote the book Gaviatis, and I can't think of his name.
Hmm.
And he gave a talk one night on how it came to fruition and then how it got reclaimed by the drug dealers once again. So it was
Oh,
drug
wow.
cartel land. This group of ecologists, scientists, everybody, they recovered the land, made it just this miracle village. And then when it really was flourishing, the cartels came back in and took it over again. So
Wow.
Gaviatis had a very telling tale.
Mm.
Um, and we did a show presentation, and the author was there. And then we also highlighted the one in Scotland, Findhorn.
Oh, yeah. I'm very
Yeah.
familiar.
And so those were our two kind of backbone stories of
Hmm.
the good, the bad, the ugly of intentional communities.
Sure. Do you mind if I dive into some more specific questions with kind of the community that you were involved with? This one that
Sure.
kind of, yeah. So when did it start and kind of how long was it around before it dismantled?
Well, we started planning in the late 80s. Christopher and I
Hmm.
started
Hmm.
planning. And so Michael Fields was up and running already,
Hmm.
the teaching center and the
Hmm.
farm and the store, and that was always up and running. Martina was involved very heavily in taking a big barn that they had and turning it into living quarters for
Hmm.
the farmers that came from all over the world so they could stay right at the Michael Fields Institute.
Hmm.
But she encountered immense opposition from the town, the county, and she'd start building and then they'd yank her permits. And she'd go and fight again and get new permits and get going, and they would shut her down again.
Mm.
So I don't really know if that housing ever got built in the barn,
Gotcha.
but I do know that they had houses on the different farms that they owned. So there was housing for people to stay, but not right at the institute. And I
I'm
don't know.
curious with, yeah, I was just curious with the permitting. Was it something where, you know, was it the county, the people lived in the area just weren't all for what was happening, so they kind of kept stopping it? Or was it more
No,
just
it
like she
was
didn't
more
quite
on
know
the
on the education of like what she was wanting to get or
no,
something like
it
that?
was more on the physical development of turning a barn into housing,
Oh,
multiple unit housing.
okay.
So
Sure.
it was more on the county and the state level,
Hmm. Okay.
um, just with the building codes. The
Hmm.
building
Okay.
codes didn't really exist.
Sure.
And so under conditional use, you'd get an approval. And this is what happened to me. And I'd go ahead and all of a sudden they'd say, well, no, we don't like that. And it was like, how did you not specify? And
Hmm.
then you said, go ahead. So I went ahead. You had my plans.
Hmm.
And then later you didn't like what was happening. So I don't think that has changed much from county
Hmm.
to county.
Hmm.
I was really happy about 6 weeks ago. I saw that the state of Maine had written and approved a statewide kind of building code for tiny house villages
Oh, okay.
because this very thing happened from county to county and even town to town. You had people saying yes, you had people saying no, and then you had people saying, come back later when we know what we're doing. So
Mm,
Colorado has, I believe, a fairly solid one plan for tiny house
hmm
villages
hmm
that are not mobile home parks, that are not campgrounds. It's specifically intentional communities.
mm,
And Maine has one. So
interesting.
I think if that perhaps had been in existence back in the 80s and 90s,
Hmm.
this project would have come into full fruition.
Do you
But
think that if
because,
it was to be instituted now, do you think that you'd still have the same issues here in Wisconsin, or do you think that people have
no,
grown and
I'm still facing those same issues right
same
now.
things? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Same exact things. Okay.
And the
That's frustrating.
interesting thing is, there are um, year-round small tiny house villages in certain counties in Wisconsin.
Hmm.
They exist.
Mm-hmm.
And then our county said no, it is a
Mm.
mobile home park. And she was very proud to tell me that they had not approved one since 1989 because the codes and stuff were so difficult that people didn't even attempt it anymore. And I
Mm,
think that's what Christopher and Martina ran into.
sure.
And also because it was Christopher pretty much spearheading this, and as he aged out, Peter took over, and then it just became a regular cookie cutter development.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Okay. What would you say your role was in the whole project just from the get-go? Just if you were to kind of
Well,
label yourself.
I was one of the initial planners with Christopher, laying out the design of the
Mhm,
buildings and the land design and, you know, how we wanted the hiking paths, how we wanted
mhm,
the parking, so it was a real structural design
mhm,
advisor.
sure. Hmm.
And then I also was very much into writing for Christopher, um, kind of the overall mission
Hmm.
statements and uh,
If you were to summarize the mission, could you summarize it in like one or two sentences or the
sure.
purpose of it? Or yeah, I'd love to hear what
It
that
was
is.
always meant to be an intentional community
Hmm.
that was open to anyone and everyone of any age or interest. And we really focused on having it a barrier-free community that people of any capability could get out and access the nature points, which were really the center point of the entire community. It was never about the housing.
Mm-hmm.
It was about the land preservation. It
Mm-hmm.
was about the connection between the people living there and the land.
Hmm.
There
Yeah.
wasn't per se garden space because there was the farm store and there were five other farms surrounding it, but it
Hmm.
was the preservation. There were wildflower prairies, there was marshes, there were woodlands, there were on the site. A beautiful creek ran through it, and there were ponds, and that was the vision was always to have the main focus and preservation of people living with the land rather than
Mm-hmm.
on the land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that.
So
Beautiful.
that's what I wrote
Yes.
about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. Um, And obviously, I get what your initial draw to the community was to create this, to help people live on the land and with the land. So that's very obvious. Um, so getting into some of the conflict stuff, which we've covered a bit of so far.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the main conflict challenge was really just kind of a butting of heads against kind of the the mission essentially, that he had one idea about the buildings and it was a completely, about the exclusivity and yeah, all of that. So I think we really understand that. I'm curious, how was that conflict? Like, how was it handled? Or was it just sort of like you just
Well,
started kind of
this was the
separating?
problem. Yeah. Peter having living close to Christopher aging, and it
Right.
became very overwhelming for Christopher. I moved away. Lou lived in Madison. So our contact with Christopher was less face to face. It was
Hmm.
at that time we didn't even have email. It was phone conversations, or we'd set up monthly get-togethers or something like that.
Hmm.
But as time went on, Peter had more and more control because he was there,
Hmm.
and he was saying what we wanted to do couldn't be done for that price. And Lou and I said, yes, it could,
Hmm.
if we kept it at a realistic, not high-end focus.
Hmm.
The buildings would be beautiful, but they would be practical. There was, like I said, no attached garages, no big
Hmm.
fancy porches, no big,
Right.
and um Peter, knowing the market and what was coming, because East Troy is very close to Chicago and the Lake Geneva area and
Hmm.
that second home market,
Hmm. Hmm.
he was envisioning and planting the seeds that this would be a weekend second home
Hmm.
for the wealthy out of the
Hmm.
urban areas. And our intent from the get-go was that people would live there. That was their primary home
Hmm.
for people that worked in the area, which was not the high end income like in the metropolitan Chicago area. And also that the people that work there would shop at the store. They would be local, very active in the local community. And Peter focused more on that they would come in and be exclusive and not really support being community members.
I guess I'd kind of a digging in question here is, were there conversations in the beginning about like your vision versus, bringing in Peter?
Oh
And I'm
yeah,
just,
Peter knew from the get-go.
oh,
He
so he
knew.
knew. Oh,
And
okay.
Lou was the head designer architect.
Uh-huh.
And over time, Peter wove his way or wormed his way or wove his
Okay.
way into
Uh,
Christopher's trust.
mm,
And uh,
mm,
he just got more and more control of the project. And it was a very slow kind
mm,
of, well, let's think about this. And this is what the market wants. And this is what the
mm,
market. Well, Peter's market was totally different than our market. So he was correct. His market did want that. But
sure.
those weren't the same people that we
Right.
had intended to be the residents.
Sure.
So um, as
I'm
he
curious,
drove
how
up,
could, if you were to go back and if you could go back in time, would there be anything that you would have, if I'd known this, or, if we'd had
yeah.
this conversation, I'm curious, what would that possibly, well, how could you have rewritten that
Well,
part?
I would have tried to rein in Peter,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I would have tried to rein in even Christopher and say, Christopher, exactly what is the the line that you won't cross?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I didn't do that. And then as we saw it morph into this high-end weekend kind of luxury getaway for
Mm-hmm.
urban people,
Mm-hmm.
um, Lou walked away. And then I, said, this is not what I really had ever wanted to envision here.
Yeah.
And since I didn't own the land, Christopher owned the land,
Okay.
that he really had the ultimate say on it.
Sure. Mm. I see.
Yeah,
That's really hard. That
yeah,
is really
it
hard.
is.
Yeah. Was there ever a point when you brought in any mediators or, just other
No,
people from the outside? No. Would that have been a good thing if you kind of had done
um,
that, or would it have helped, do you think? Or
I think at that point, see, and I think it's Peter Schwalbe. I can't remember, but he has an incredible reputation,
mm,
and he has an incredible, I mean, for doing high-end development.
sure.
That fighting Peter to get his hands off the project would have been a very expensive legal battle. Because Christopher wasn't heading it up,
Hmm.
that Lou and I had we had no traction in it. We didn't own it.
Hmm. Hmm. Sure. So I'm just curious if you were to kind of do this again, um, you know, just having like each of the stakeholders have like equal weight in the decision making, or, it's tricky when like one person lives there and owns property and someone doesn't. And I
Right.
just think about this, for the future of other intentional communities where that is often probably the case where someone has the money, they have the vision, but they also need the people. And so I'm curious, as you look back, do you have ideas about, well, what would be more equitable or what would be something that would
Well,
work for
we
us?
failed to create like a residential board of potential residents, of them
Hmm.
coming in and saying, this is what we would like to see. And if this is here, we
Hmm.
would buy into the project.
Hmm.
We just assumed they would,
Sure.
and Peter just assumed his people would. And
Hmm.
again, his people were not our people were not his people.
Right, right.
And since we never physically had people involved,
Sure.
we were both representing totally different ends of the spectrum of who the residents were going to be.
And so
And to
you
be,
didn't even ever get people? Is that what I just heard you say? Like you were all in the planning stages of everything, but was there never, like, other than you and Peter and, Christopher, were
yeah,
there other people?
we never got to that point.
Never got to the people, okay, of the
Yeah.
intentional community. Okay, that's what I wanted to
But
know. It's
then
like, how
when Lou
big
and
was
I
it?
walked away, Peter, of
Hmm.
course, he must have started marketing because the properties, some got built and they were sold, but it never developed into the full community.
Okay, okay, okay. So it was really, how many of there were you in the beginning? Was it just the four of you or
Yeah,
so?
it was just the
Yeah,
four of
just the
us.
four of you. Okay.
Actually, just the three of us.
Three.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, Christopher, Lou, and I.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Okay. This is
Yeah.
so, yeah.
And then, like I said, the problem was East Troy itself, that whole community, that whole
Mm-hmm.
county
Mm-hmm.
was undergoing a massive change from a rural economy to a more urban, high-end
Mm-hmm.
community
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it was so close again to Lake Geneva and the very exclusive
Sure.
weekend getaway properties that
Mm-hmm.
this was kind of, and that's what the county wanted because the taxes, they would collect more taxes if they had higher end homes.
Mm-hmm.
And they loved it because weekend people didn't put people in the schools, so they didn't have to offer the community services
Oh,
of
goodness.
school. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Versus having residents, then you have to deal with schools and
Mm-hmm.
municipality, um, fire and water and services, where
Mm-hmm.
weekend people, they paid in a lot in taxes and they took out very little in services because they just weren't there.
Sure. Absolutely. I understand completely. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Um,
So it was definitely a very urban rural tug of war there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of questions I had about membership, but there was never any membership because the people weren't there. You were more in the planning,
Yeah.
structural stages of things. How long did this whole process continue? Like when did you join and then when were you out? I'm just kind of curious how long that time frame was.
I would say I was involved from the late 80s to the mid 90s, so I
Okay.
probably 7 or 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Lou was probably three, maybe 3 years involved in it, three to
Mm-hmm.
four years.
Mm-hmm.
And then Peter came in, I would say halfway through the project in the mid 90s.
Okay. Okay.
And I kind of walked away at the 1998, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
was involved from the 88 to 98.
Sure, sure. And I know you were more in the structural phase of things, but was there any sort of financial structure that was set up or, who was handling all of that? I'm
Well, that was
curious.
all privately funded by Christopher.
Okay. That's what I figured, but I just thought I
Yeah.
would ask. Yeah.
And
So
Chris,
he,
the interesting thing is Christopher never asked Lou or I to invest. It was
hmm.
always going to be his,
Oh, interesting.
because he and Martina were financially very solid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, do you think that there was potential for issues though, having that they had all the money, they were the funders, like the power dynamics of,
Well, and
making decisions?
I think that's what Peter tapped into.
hmm hmm Sure. Absolutely. Makes perfect sense. Yeah, these are all the questions, just the power dynamics can be such an
Well,
issue. It's great to
and
have someone who has the money, but
right. And I think when you have more stakeholders that actually have money invested, or at least the potential that there is a diversified
Mhm.
investment needed for a project
Yes.
like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
then you're much more willing and more motivated to seek that kind of collaborative input where
Absolutely.
we didn't need it at that in this project
hmm
because the funding was never an issue.
Right. Right. hmm Absolutely.
And
Eh,
I never got paid. I never asked for payment.
Wow.
I did it because I really believed in the project. I lived close by. I loved Christopher and Martina, and
hmm
I had, again, the wherewithal that I didn't need to collect a salary. Now, Lou got paid.
Mm.
Lou, was
hmm
paid. He was a
Okay.
paid professional.
Okay. And what was Lou's official role or job title, or essentially with the
Well,
project?
he owned an architectural firm
Okay.
um, in Madison,
Okay.
a very well established firm. And
Mhm.
I don't even know the name of his firm anymore. Sorry
That's
about
okay.
that.
Yeah, that's okay. No problem.
He's
Yeah.
long since retired as well.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. So there weren't any financial challenges, but we had lots of other challenges with other things.
Yeah.
And in terms of financial decision-making process, it sounds like it was all Christopher and Martina doing all of the financial decision-making, or was there any say from anyone else? Were you
No,
involved with
just
that?
Christopher and Martina.
Okay,
Well,
that's fine.
and Christopher headed up the board of the Michael Fields Agricultural Institute. So
Okay.
he had funded the 10,000 square foot learning center. He had funded the barn being transitioned into I mean, Christopher, he had owned all five farms.
Wow.
So, I mean, Christopher
Mm-hmm.
uh, was very solid financially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm curious, were there any income generating strategies that you had, in the initial visioning of the
Well,
project?
the um the store was up and running.
Okay.
The
And when you say
10,000.
store, was it like a co-op or like a little grocery
Yeah, it
store?
was a
What was it?
co-op, but it sold fresh fruits and vegetables off the farms, meats off
Okay.
the farms,
Okay.
and then it sold a lot of herbal supplements.
hmm
And it was a very well, I would say like a natural health food store.
Sure. Hmm.
It was very well established, and they had a
Okay.
bakery there.
Hmm.
So they had enough that if the community would come in, they could
Hmm.
buy and
Hmm.
be good customers.
Hmm.
And that was another thing. It was this kind of hand in hand. We'll form a community and they'll have really good access to wonderful food right on site.
Sure. Hmm.
And so that would support each other and support the store as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
Um, because right across the street was a major like Century store and a typical grocery and all that.
Oh, okay.
So
I guess I have a question really quick about the farms because
yeah,
you had the farms that were growing the food that went into the co-op. So were there people employed working on the farms then?
yeah. Well, one of the farms, Christopher had bought, and then I don't know if, and I don't know too much if he had sold it or leased it to the Zinnecker family or if
Okay.
they owned it themselves. But
Okay.
they were a biodynamic farm.
Okay.
And then and they did, I think they did dairy. Then
Okay.
Christopher bought another farm and they did exclusive meat, beef and
Okay.
pork. And then
Hmm.
he had another farm that just did exclusive um, fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
So all the fine were under this canopy of Michael Fields, but
Okay.
I don't know exactly who owned what because I know the
Mm.
Zinekers may have owned their own farm and then Christopher owned the other four.
Okay.
I went to the farms, but I saw the people working and the management, but
Uh-huh.
I never was allowed to,
Okay.
or I never asked who owned exactly what.
Yeah, I was just curious, again, the community piece. I just figured if you were living in the community, you'd be working on the farm, but it sounds like these are more like private, like families that were
Yeah,
managing these farms, and he
yeah,
just was sort of the overall umbrella
yeah.
of everything. Interesting. Okay. Were there some strategies that you would say worked in your working relationship with everyone that you think are these are, something that you would say you definitely should do this because this was a really great, dynamic or a setup or whatever it might be, some strategy.
Well, of course, the in-person meetings
Hmm.
together were always more productive than phone calls. Now, remember, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have
Of
internet.
course. Yep.
So, so the in-persons were much better than phone one-on-one because we didn't even have group phone chat. It was,
Sure. Sure.
I'd talk to Christopher and then I'd call Lou and tell Lou what happened with my con.
Hmm.
I mean, it
Yeah.
almost seems dark ages now,
I
but
know, but yeah, that's how it was.
that's the way we operated. And then we did a lot by mail, handwriting and mail back and forth.
Sure. Sure.
Um, so of course the in-person was much better. And
Hmm.
not only in person, when we would get together at the site and walk the site and
Sure.
say, this is what we had on paper, but the site, the land is telling us maybe we should adjust and do it here or there.
Hmm. Sure. Were there any
And
strategies
that
that
was
you,
the downfall of Peter.
oh,
Peter didn't come into these meetings.
oh, okay.
Peter had a big fancy office and would do everything from his office.
I see.
I don't ever remember seeing Peter on the site, walking the site with us.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a
But
downfall.
our in person got less and less frequent too, because
Mm,
that is not how Peter operated. He operated
mm,
out of his big office and
hmm.
didn't like us. We were on the land, listening to the
Sure.
land, and yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So if you could do that again, just get Peter there in person. I mean, it sounds like a different
Yes,
philosophy, but just, to have him there in person and not just
yes,
be operating from his office
office.
afar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
He also had, at the same time of Michael Fields, he had multiple um, projects going that were much bigger,
Hmm.
development projects.
Okay.
I think his
Interesting.
name is Peter Schwalb. I don't know. Schalb. I don't know. He probably well, he was quite a bit older, so I'm thinking he's long gone too
Hmm.
now.
Could be.
Or,
Yeah.
but I think his business probably, because he had offices not only in East Troy, he had them in different parts of the state. It was a
Hmm.
big
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it.
engineering development firm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. I've got some questions about kind of agreements. So did you guys ever have formal or informal agreements? Just, those of you who originally started it, not necessarily Peter, but maybe when Peter came in, did you have any sort of governance agreements or
Nope,
bylaws or board or anything along those lines? So none of
nope,
that. Oh wow.
none of
Okay,
that.
that's really interesting. Okay, so no written agreements. So
So I would present things that I had drawn up and written up. Lou would present, of course, all his architectural documents and renderings and all that.
mhm,
Lou would bring in what he envisioned. I would bring in what I envisioned.
mhm,
And Christopher, at the very beginning, had used all the documents that he had used to set up the Michael Fields in England.
mhm,
So he had
mhm,
all those renderings and everything.
mhm.
But as far as I know, Christopher did not drop anything for the new project. He relied on Lou and I to do it
Okay, interesting.
based on his renderings from his past project.
Sure. Okay, well, that's fascinating that there was nothing kind of written down about, the structure of the community or even the vision. Did you ever have a mission or vision like written down as well?
Yeah, we
Or
did.
you did?
We
Okay,
had,
so you had
oh
that.
yeah, what the
Okay.
vision was and mission state. I had
Hmm.
written all that. I
Okay,
didn't
so you did an
keep
emission
any of it. I
statement.
turned it all over to Christopher.
Okay, sure.
Like again, the specifics, a walkable
Hmm.
community
Hmm.
and not
Sure.
disturbing this area and not even not disturbing the elevations. When they were low swales, we would not fill them. We would leave them for the
Hmm.
birds and the natural habitation.
Sure,
So it
sure.
was just this beautiful sight.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it sounds like didn't really have too much governance, decision-making model that you were following. It sounds like it was
No.
more, yeah, no, that's what I thought. Yeah.
But
And
that was not unusual at that time, though,
sure, sure, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
because even when we presented the plans to the county and the
Hmm.
town,
Hmm.
they didn't ask for that.
Sure, sure. That's interesting. Yeah. I was gonna say, just getting to back into a little bit of the zoning, what were so the specific zoning restrictions that you encountered were at the county level, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you started at the East Troy city town level,
Okay.
to, and then from there, if they said, "Yeah, we kind of like this," then you move
Hmm.
to the county level.
Okay.
And that's
Okay.
where all the regulations, building codes and permitting and all that
Sure.
was done
Okay.
through the county level.
Hmm. Sure. So even if you think you've made it through the first,
Yeah,
tier, you might get stopped in the next tier. So
yeah,
that's got to be really tricky because, how are you starting to build things or you not building until you've gone to all the meetings and gotten all sort of the red tape
right.
stuff figured out first? Is that what you did? You just kind of did all the meeting
Yes,
stuff, were on hold, but you had everything ready to go. Okay.
yeah.
How long did that take? I'm curious before you got to the point
Oh,
of
I would say
getting the
Lou and
pushback.
Christopher and I, we probably met for a good solid 2 years, got things put down on paper.
Hmm.
Well, no, I'll back up. Christopher and I met almost for 2 years just ourselves.
Hmm.
And then
Sure.
I brought Lou in, and worked with us for the next 2.5, 3 years, somewhere in there.
Hmm.
And then Lou was the formal, put everything on paper and
Hmm.
CAD design and did all that.
Sure. Sure. And remind me again, Lou's role was, I'll go
He's
back in my notes later,
he
but
was the initial architect.
architect. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
But he also did the site planning.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Great. And yeah, just in terms of maintaining trust and accountability, if there was anything that you could do over there with the team or anything along those lines, would there be anything that you would recommend or implement?
Well, I guess I personally should have looked more into Peter's um, business practices.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
knew a little that his headquarters were in East Troy, that he was an architect and a builder developer, but I didn't know any of the projects that he had done in the past or anything that he was currently doing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I when Peter came in, I just thought he was going to be just kind of this outside voice looking in on what we were doing.
Sure,
I
sure.
never, ever
Mm,
anticipated that his plans, I think, were to
mm,
take over the entire project.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Can understand that. So I guess I'm curious if you have advice for new communities, any, just things that you think you should definitely do this. This is so vital. I highly recommend it. So what kind of ideas or thoughts do you have
Well,
on
of
that?
course, bringing stakeholders in from the get-go,
Mm-hmm.
not just the financial people
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or the design people, but bring residents in or potential residents in. Also distributing the investment. So not one person really kind of has all the purse strings
Mm-hmm.
and the complete, which is a really double-edged sword because I mean, that's the dream, have somebody in to finance this whole thing, but you saw the outcome of it. Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing I think is that we waited too long for the progression of it
Hmm.
as it was progressing, and we were getting horrified by seeing all of a sudden garages and roadways, and that at that point we just opted to say this is not, and we kind of walked away instead of trying to rein it back in.
Mm.
It
Mm-hmm.
was almost like the Pandora box was open. How do
Sure.
you go back to the simplicity and the purity of it when the market was saying, oh, there's big dollars and big profits to be made in this?
Mm-hmm. So almost like maybe like having a plan where, 6 months down, maybe a year, like a check back in. Are we still staying
Yeah,
true to our integrity, our mission?
yeah.
Have we gone off the
Well, and
rails
I
here?
think too, if we, Lou and I, would have developed a stronger blueprint to show who the residents and who the buyers were
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the demand for this,
Mm-hmm.
I think we could have probably at least counteracted Peter's big push that
Mm-hmm.
it was going to be the weekend wealthy urban people
Mm-hmm.
second
Sure.
home.
Sure. Sure. Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I guess you have to really know who you want the residents to be,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
necessarily financially who the
Mm-hmm.
best, most solid are.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there any areas that you're just incredibly proud of, just some successes that you want to share that you think would be really good and valuable for future
Well, I
communities?
love that the movie got made, that
Hmm.
Christopher, um, even though I think the project was a disappointment to him too in
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
end,
Hmm.
um, he made the movie to show that his heart and soul was still in sustainable living and farming, and
Hmm.
that his legacy was preserved. And the project, now I have not been back to look at it probably in 6 or 7 years, so I don't know.
Mm.
But at that time, I would say maybe there were 6 or 8 of the units built.
Hmm. Sure.
So I don't know. I do
Yeah.
not know if
So it
it
didn't
just,
completely crumble. Like, there's some units there, you just don't
yeah,
know who the people are who are living there
yeah,
and what they're paying, all that.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, anything else you want to share about anything around, this community or anything else?
Well, I would say the initial thing is that whoever goes into this community, they really have to decide absolutely what is the focus.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the land? Is it the people? Is it,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you are trying to make as your legacy?
Sure.
And who are you trying to um, really involve? This is the other thing that was really sad. Our main focus was on all the flora and fauna too.
Mm-hmm.
And that was absolutely not a priority for Peter.
Mm-hmm.
His was people, people, people. And
Mm-hmm.
ours was this is all the living things
Mm-hmm.
that are going to call this place home. And we failed. We failed to protect the animals. We
Mm-hmm.
failed to protect the plant community. Um, because we believed Christopher was going to do that because that's where his heart and soul was.
Right. Right.
And I did not see that in the final plans
Mm-hmm.
or the actual building of it. That
Mm-hmm.
got diluted down. So I don't
Absolutely.
know. I'm not against Peter. Peter is good at what Peter does.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel like we were really good at what we wanted to do,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but it was like apples and oranges. They were
Sure.
never going to be interchangeable
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because they were based so differently on the philosophy and the mission. And I think that is the number one thing that has to get not only written down, but has to have everybody sign and agree upon. This is it. This is who we are going to be. And if we deviate from this, will this project go forward?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So now I know you don't want to talk about it, but Lucas was up here and
Yeah.
he looked at my farm
Uh-huh.
and his heart and soul was set on doing something in Madison or Milwaukee in an urban area. Is he still focused just on urban area?
No, I don't think so. I think that he has a lot of different focuses. I think ultimately it probably would be more rural than urban. He's talked about having both actually, urban kind of connected to the rural, like
Okay.
bringing the people from the city out to the rural. And I think that that's a beautiful model. So I think he's open to both, is my honest answer.
Because I'd like
Um,
to have him, if he wants, I would like to pursue talks with him because we've built all the infrastructure here. We've
yeah.
built the water, the septic, the electric for expansion. In fact, I just talked to the county and I was shocked on our 5 acre surveyed off campground. I have, this the cabins. And I said, what if I wanted to bring in and do pads for tiny houses? How many, you know, parking pads could I have? And on the 5 acres, they said, you can have 100. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, you're allotted 25 per acre, which to me is crazy density, but that's what a typical campground looks like.
Sure.
And I said, no, 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 no. We want to do an intentional small village, intentional village. She said, well, then